The restaurant lights shimmered against the glass walls like fragments of a broken dream. Inside, laughter floated from polished tables and expensive suits, but at one quiet corner, a man sat motionless, staring at his reflection in the glass. His name was Ethan Cole, a 38-year-old CEO who could sign billion-dollar deals without blinking, yet tonight, his chest felt strangely hollow. The woman across from him hadn't arrived yet. It wasn't just another business dinner or social formality, it was a blind date his best friend had insisted on. Ethan wasn't sure why he had agreed. Maybe it was loneliness. Maybe it was the way his daughter, Lila, had recently begun asking him, "Daddy, why don't we have anyone who hugs you at night?" Before the story continues, if you believe in kindness, love, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. It helps us spread more heartwarming stories like this one. Yellow Heart. Ethan had been a single father for 6 years. His wife, Emily, had died in a car crash one rainy evening, leaving him with a 2-year-old and an empire he never wanted to run alone. Since then, he had built his company higher and his walls thicker. No interviews, no dates, no attachments. But lately, Lila's questions had become heavier. "Daddy, why don't you smile when you come home? Daddy, will you ever fall in love again?" Her small voice had cracked something deep inside him, something he didn't know was still alive. So here he was, waiting for a stranger, pretending this wasn't terrifying. Then she walked in. Her name was Sophie Lane, a woman in her late 20s, dressed simply in a pale blue dress that brushed her knees. She wasn't what Ethan expected, no corporate air, no calculated smile. Just quiet eyes, the kind that carried stories. She apologized softly for being late, her cheeks flushed from running. Ethan felt an unfamiliar warmth stir inside him, something tender and reluctant. They talked. About small things first. Music, travel, books. Then deeper things, loss, hope, childhood dreams. Sophie wasn't impressed by his company name or his wealth. She listened like every word mattered. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt seen. As the evening faded into golden light, Sophie laughed about spilling coffee on her dress during an interview that morning. She told him she worked at a children's shelter, teaching art to kids who had no one to believe in them. Ethan found himself smiling at her words, imagining her sitting on a paint-stained floor surrounded by giggling children. Her world was small but full of light, his was vast but endlessly gray. He didn't notice time slip away until his phone buzzed, a message from the nanny, "Lila's asking for you." Guilt immediately shadowed his face. Sophie caught it and said with gentle humor, "Duty calls, Mr. CEO." He almost didn't want to leave, but he thanked her and promised to text. She smiled, not expecting he really would. Yet when he drove home that night, the echo of her laughter stayed with him longer than his own heartbeat. The next morning, life resumed its usual rhythm of boardrooms, deadlines, and empty dinners. But Lila noticed something different. "Daddy, you're humming," she said, tilting her head. He laughed, a little embarrassed. She smiled knowingly, like children do when they sense something magical. Days passed, and Ethan found himself checking his phone between meetings, waiting for a reply. When Sophie finally texted, a simple, "Hope your day's not too stressful," he felt the oddest relief. Their messages grew frequent, then daily. Lunches turned into dinners, dinners into weekend visits. Slowly, Sophie became a quiet presence in their lives. She'd come over sometimes with art supplies for Lila, teaching her how to mix colors or draw her feelings on paper. The house, once echoing with silence, now carried laughter again. Lila adored her. She'd wait by the window when Sophie was due to visit, holding a crayon in one hand and hope in the other. But not everyone approved. The board members whispered. Ethan's assistant hinted that a woman from a lower background might not fit into his world. Even Ethan's late wife's mother called one night, her voice sharp with concern. "You can't let a woman from a shelter step into Emily's place," she said coldly. Those words burned in his mind. That night, Ethan looked at Sophie's photo on his phone and wondered if love could truly exist between two people from such different worlds. He didn't reply to her messages for 2 days. When Sophie finally showed up at his office, she didn't come angry, just quietly hurt. She placed a small paper crane on his desk, something Lila had folded the last time they met. "She misses you," Sophie said softly. "And I didn't come here to fight your battles, Ethan. I came because love shouldn't be treated like a scandal." She left before he could respond, leaving behind the faint scent of paint and heartbreak. That night, Ethan sat on the floor of his study, holding the tiny paper crane. Lila crept in, her little pajamas wrinkled. She climbed into his lap, looked at the crane, and whispered, "Daddy, can we keep her?" The question hit harder than any truth he'd ever faced. His daughter didn't see wealth, class, or fear. She just saw love. He hugged her close, his eyes wet against her hair. "I hope so, sweetheart," he whispered, realizing how much he already wanted that too. But life, as always, had other plans. The next morning, Ethan received news that the company was under investigation due to a false rumor about charity funds being mishandled, ironically, donations meant for the very shelter Sophie worked at. It spread fast, painting headlines of corruption and manipulation. Social media exploded. Sophie was suddenly accused of being the leak, the woman who used the CEO for money and sympathy. Reporters camped outside her small apartment. She lost her job. Overnight, her world collapsed. Ethan could have stayed silent to protect his company's image. His PR team advised it. "Distance yourself from her, sir. She's the distraction." But deep inside, Ethan knew what was right. That night, during a televised conference, he did the unthinkable. He walked up to the podium, looked straight into the flashing cameras, and said, "The woman you're blaming saved my daughter's smile. She reminded me what humanity looks like. She's not my scandal, she's my reason to change." The silence that followed was deafening, then filled with murmurs, then applause. It was the first time in years Ethan had spoken with his heart instead of his title. Afterward, he drove straight to Sophie's place. The media still lingered outside, hungry for more. Sophie stood by her door, pale and shaken, her apartment half-packed. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice trembling. He stepped closer, his eyes raw. "I should have been here long ago." He took her hands, rough from paint and tears. "Sophie, I built everything thinking love was a weakness. But you and Lila proved it's the only thing that makes us strong." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for sincerity, and then, finally, she let herself fall into his arms. Time moved forward, slowly healing what pain had fractured. The investigation cleared, the truth surfaced. Sophie returned to her work at the shelter, this time with Ethan quietly funding it under a new charity foundation, one that helped children and single parents rebuild their lives. Their relationship no longer needed approval. It was real, imperfect, and deeply human. Months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Ethan stood in the kitchen making pancakes, a disastrous but heartfelt attempt. Sophie laughed softly, helping him rescue the burnt edges. Lila ran in, hair messy, holding her favorite stuffed bear. She climbed onto a stool and announced proudly, "Daddy, I told my friends you're keeping her forever." They both burst into laughter. Ethan looked at Sophie and said, "Seems like I don't have much choice." She smiled, eyes shimmering. "It's not keeping, Ethan. It's belonging." And in that sunlit kitchen, surrounded by warmth and laughter, Ethan realized something profound. Love doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for courage. The courage to open your heart again after it's been shattered. The courage to trust when it's easier to hide. That night, as he tucked Lila into bed, she looked up sleepily and said, "Daddy, are you happy now?" He brushed a strand of hair from her face and whispered, "More than I ever thought I could be." Down the hall, Sophie hummed softly as she painted in the living room, a melody of peace that filled their home. Sometimes, love doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes quietly, like sunlight through curtains, warming the coldest corners of your heart until you remember what it means to feel alive again. If this story touched your heart or reminded you that love can heal even the deepest wounds, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Red Heart. And before you go, comment below. What would you have done if your child asked, "Daddy, can we keep her?"